Welcome to Therapeutic Intentions Podcast. My name is Stephanie Dingbaum. I am a mental health therapist, and I am so passionate about all things health and wellness, personal development, and empowering others to be their most authentic and best versions of themselves. Here at Therapeutic Intentions, we are all about having intentional and authentic conversations on whole body health, healing practices, mindset, and ways to uplevel your life so you can truly be the best version of you. If you are a woman, a mom, hope to someday be a mom, a healer, or just in a place where you want to start prioritizing yourself and your health, then this podcast is for you. I am so glad you're here. If you're ready, let's get to it. Hello. Welcome back to Therapeutic Intentions Podcast. I want to take a couple minutes before we dive into part 2 of the mini-series, and I haven't shared any reviews with you guys lately. I haven't done any shout outs lately, and so I thought I would take some time before I hit play on the collab today to share a review I got. This one actually came from a friend this past week, a dear friend of mine who we have just grown significantly closer in the last couple of years. She's actually married to one of my husband's best friends, and I love this girl to pieces. At work this week, she was alone at the office, and she decided that in the background she would binge my podcast. And full transparency, I'm not doing this podcast for friends and family. I'm doing it in hopes of getting seen and heard, beyond the borders of Iowa, beyond Eastern Iowa, which that is happening. The stats prove that, which has been so humbling. But whenever I get feedback from a friend or a family member, it's just so heartwarming. And so I just wanted to do a shout out to my friend Nicole. She sent me just some really powerful texts this last week. And she literally, she had to get caught up on the podcast. So she binged me literally all week from episode 1 to episode 27. So you can imagine she had a lot of feedback to give me, which I appreciate so much. So I just wanted to do a quick shout out to Nicole. She texted me this week and said that listening to your podcast this week has made it a very powerful couple of days. She had shared that she absolutely loves the fact that the podcast is things that I've actually said directly to her before. She said, "It's truly your true self coming through. It's totally you. So many times as I'm listening, I've said to myself, Steph has said that exact same thing to me lately." And she said, "I can't wait to listen to more. I'm going to be so bummed when I'm all caught up and only have one episode a week to listen to." And then the last thing she said is, "It's literally perfect for you. You sound so natural. You can just tell that you've soaked up so much information." I cannot thank you enough, Nicole. Thank you so much for that amazing feedback. It's so humbling. It's so heartwarming to get feedback. Like I said, I don't do this for friends and family. I do it to get out to listeners beyond Iowa. And when I get feedback of any kind, whether it's a review from a stranger or a friend or whoever, it's such a heartwarming experience. And so I just wanted to do a quick shout out to her. Thank you, girl. I appreciate you. Love you so much. And just want to do a quick plug. If you've been listening, whether you're a new listener or you've been a long-time listener and you haven't rated the podcast yet, go on, rate it. And if you are comfortable, please rate me a review. I try and check them. I would say I check them about once a month. And then if I do have any new reviews on whether it be Spotify or YouTube or Apple Podcasts, I'll do a shout out and I'll share it with listeners on an upcoming episode. So please, if you're comfortable, leave me a review. I would appreciate it. You can also DM me directly on Instagram if you'd like to share your feedback with me that way too. I'll still do a shout out regardless, but I will say the ratings and the reviews directly on the apps, the podcast apps, is so helpful, because then as people search for the podcast, the more ratings and reviews that I have, the more likely it is that my podcast will be higher up on the list when people are searching for a podcast. So please consider doing that. It literally takes less than 5 seconds, and you have no idea how much it means to me to see the ratings increase and to get more reviews on there as well. So take some time, do that. Hit pause right now. Do that before I hit play on the collab. I really appreciate it. All right. Well, let's dive into the collab. I'm just going to hit play and we will get started.
Hello, beautiful people. This is Stephanie Dingbaum with Therapeutic Intentions Podcast. I have Hilary and I on here today. Thank you for coming back, Hilary.
Thank you.
Yeah, we have episode 3 of our mini series, and today we're talking about, I don't know the title yet, religion and spirituality, I guess is what I'll say. So a little backstory. I grew up in a somewhat religious family. My parents were both in the Army, and we moved to Iowa, where my mom is originally from, when I was 5, turning 6, I think. And so as soon as we moved to Iowa, my mom had found a local church and wanted to get more involved, because when we lived on the military base, I don't ever remember going to church. I don't think we belonged to a church in Illinois where we lived. And so, she wanted to find a local church that we could get involved with, and found one here in Earlville. It was the Methodist Church. And yeah, that was the church I grew up going to. And honestly, a lot of our church family were like family to us. And I feel like my values came from going to church. I feel I'm really grateful that I have that foundation, that spiritual foundation that I learned from going to church. It's a big part of who I am. I think it's made it easier to go through some of the trauma and hard times I've gone through in life. But interestingly enough, growing up around religion, and in the last, since COVID hit, so I had a spiritual awakening the week COVID hit is when it started. And I really noticed that first year of COVID, when I became extremely spiritual, I felt like I really noticed a lot of guilt, like feeling guilty that I no longer wanted to go to church, feeling guilty that I wasn't drawn to church, feeling guilty that I wasn't being fed in church, feeling guilty that I was distancing myself from people at the church, from the church. And I really had to dig into that in therapy. Why are you feeling guilty for this if it's not feeding you spiritually? Did you have any experience similar to that in your life, Hilary, or?
So I grew up in Illinois. I didn't realize you grew up in Illinois too. So I grew up Catholic.
Okay.
And Catholic guilt is a motherfucker.
Oh, it is. It's a bitch. Yeah. I have heard that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So definitely resonate with the guilt aspect of it. Grew up Catholic. I wouldn't say that we were super every Sunday churchgoers and that. And then my parents got divorced when I was 12. But I remember, the baptism and going to religion classes and that. And then when my parents got divorced, it kind of, all of that stopped.
Sure.
And so then I think that, gives you a different relationship with God, with spirit, when you go through those sort of trauma points in life, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. I feel like when I broke my neck in 2016, my faith grew exponentially. And I I just noticed like there were so many miracles. Go back and listen to those 2 episodes if you haven't.
They're
'Cause
great
I've heard they're
episodes.
powerful. And I apologize ahead of time if they make you cry. I did not anticipate them hitting people like that. But like I said in the episode, I don't remember it. So to me, it's just telling a story. But yeah, my faith grew exponentially. And I just, because I noticed all of these miracles that came out of this event and then, you know, being told like you could have died and you should have, or you could be paralyzed and you should have been. And it really hits you. I mean, any near-death experience just changes your relationship with God, source, whoever your belief system is. And so I felt like my faith grew a lot in that time. But then when COVID hit and I realized, yeah, there is a higher power at work here. And I had a friend, it's actually a buddy of Mitch's, who was sending me these YouTube videos. I can't remember his name now. I should have looked it up before we hit record, but they're really old. Like they're from probably like late 90s, maybe early 2000s. They're really old. Like somebody uploaded them onto YouTube. And this guy talks about how there's numerology in the Bible and talks about how you know, there's these religions that speak negatively about like yoga and mediums and just those alternative spiritual practices. And I feel like since listening to those videos, it kind of like flipped a switch in my head. Like these times when I do meditation, these times when I do yoga, these times when I ground myself is really, in my eyes, is me connecting with the Holy Spirit. And now even when people talk about like, okay, like really tune into your intuition, like what is your gut telling you? Like what is that inner wisdom telling you? Well, that gut, that inner wisdom is me connecting with the Holy Spirit, I believe. And that's not necessarily how I grew up being taught though. I look at the Bible a little differently now. And after I worked through that guilt of like feeling guilty for not being drawn to church anymore, I realized like your spiritual health is better in some ways because of it.
Yeah, so I am trying to remember, I think maybe it was a podcast or a book or something like that. I kind of talked about the difference, you know, or this idea of religion versus spirituality and that sort of thing. And it was a really interesting perspective because it's actually said that a lot of people who grow up in very religious families or the church kind of as an institution are the ones that are now more spiritual in life. But then those that grew up maybe in more hippie or spiritual families are actually really drawn to religion and being part of a church now. So we want to think about that in two different ways. So we can think about the church as like a group, as a community, and the spirituality as an individual quest. And so for some people, the church as an institution, they need almost like that person on the pedestal that can tell them, that can teach them, that can speak to them, for them to then absorb, listen, and feel like part of something larger and greater. And those that are maybe drawn to more spiritual practices see that God is everywhere, spirit is everywhere, and it is inside of us. Yes. And we are, the Holy Spirit is here, and we have the ability to connect.
Yeah. Yep. I agree. Like when I think about that part in the Bible where Jesus, I think he's in the garden, it's like after he found out that he was betrayed and then he's in the garden, like I truly believe he was meditating. And I truly believe that meditation is becoming one with the Holy Spirit, because that inner wisdom, because we know it never steers us wrong, just like we know the Holy Spirit never steers us wrong. So they're one and the same. They're not two separate things. They are. And I fully believe that, because it just, there's no way they're two separate things. There's no way.
Right. Absolutely. And I have a lot of clients who really struggle with the word God. Like the word God triggers the fuck out of people. Right.
Yeah.
And it is less about, I feel like where they're coming from is they really have a hard time with not necessarily spirituality, God, Jesus, believing in a higher power. Where they have an issue or a struggle comes down to the institution, the church, that as like an organization, and one that is very masculine based and kind of that ego-ish based in a way, right? With the all-knowing. And the guilt and the oh, if you do this, you're sinning and you're going to hell, and the things that make you feel bad, less than, and kind of take you out of power. Where again, when we come into more of a spiritual practice, we really are owning our own power.
Yeah.
And I dislike that. I don't like when it is okay for, I kind of struggle on some of the Facebook stuff where it's like okay for people to really talk about God and church and religion and their water baptisms and they've seen Jesus and this and that. But then those who want to talk about, you know, animal spirits and oracle decks and this and that, we're wrong. Why is my God different than your God? You know?
Right. Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, because it seems like when I went through my spiritual awakening, I actually talked to my therapist about this at the time, because I kind of went back and forth between like, I do believe God is my higher power, but I also believe the universe plays a role. It's like, but I mean, they're probably all the same. But I try to incorporate all those beliefs into the podcast. And like whenever I talk about like higher powers, I always make sure to say like God, source, universe, energy, whatever, you know what I mean? Like, because it doesn't really matter. We just know that there is a higher power. So the name that we give to it, in my opinion, doesn't really matter. But it is interesting because I felt when I went through my spiritual awakening, like when I was growing up in a religious household, I would say my belief system kind of like fit into a box. And then I became really spiritual. I had this spiritual awakening, COVID hit, and then it was like the box exploded and I was seeing God and spiritual instances, synchronicities everywhere. And it's like, oh my gosh, we do not live on a physical, like, yes, we live on a physical planet, but like we are spiritual beings at heart surviving in a physical world. And it's so freaking powerful. It blows my mind.
It is. I also really like to talk about with clients too, who may struggle with the God term or have some of that adversity to that. I always say though, I feel like part of my work here is really to embody the energy of Christ consciousness. And I think that's what we're trying to do as a planet. And what does that come down to? That's not a building. It's not, you know, a church pew. It's not time, talent, and treasure. It is Christ consciousness is unconditional love and compassion. That is what Jesus taught. That's what Jesus came here to teach. That's what he's still teaching and moving through us. And so ultimately it is, can I, as a human being, embody Christ consciousness? Can I show unconditional love and compassion to myself and to every human being I encounter? Because every human I see reflects back to me parts of me.
Yes. Yeah. That's beautiful. So I got baptized for the first time when I was 7, and then I got rebaptized as an adult at 24, maybe 23. And at that time, I was kind of church hopping. And it's interesting to me how some of the churches around here, or some of like the non-denominational churches, which is what I'm drawn to, will have like this, I'm going to call it like rule, that to join, you have to get rebaptized. And I just always really struggled with that, because getting baptized should be, in my opinion, a very personal decision. I mean, it's your way of... like,
it's a sacrament. It's sacred.
Yeah, exactly. And I just feel that's a very personal decision. So if I'm doing it because the church tells me I need to, then am I really doing it for the right reasons? But yeah, I do. And I will say, I struggle with the politics in churches. And then I have a lot of people in my life who have gotten like burned by a church and burned pretty badly to the point where like they'll probably never walk into a church door again because this person that stands up on the altar and talks to us every Sunday, we without even knowing it, we subconsciously put them on a pedestal.
We project our power to them.
Yeah, like they can do no wrong. And that's so ridiculous because yes, they can. They're
Oh,
actually
and
only
yes,
human.
they have.
Yeah, exactly. They're only human like you and I.
Exactly.
And so I think that's really hard for some people who have gotten burned by a church because of this powerful person. I mean, hypothetically powerful person. And then unfortunately it's like that those situations getting burned then really impacts their relationship with God, which is sad to me because that person up on the altar is not God. So then why them doing wrong or the church body doing wrong, that should not hurt our relationship with God, but you see it all the time. And that's sad to me.
Right. It's also really interesting to me, especially, if we want to talk about Catholicism, right? There are males, and so there's that balance of, well, why can't it be a female? Why is the male the all-knowing power,
Yeah.
And a lot of, Catholicism, I think it was, I'm pretty sure in the last couple of years, the Archdiocese of Dubuque has, denounced basically Reiki is witchcraft and, all the things.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yes. And, and you have to think about that. It's like, a lot of people who do energetic healing work are females.
Yeah.
And it's that sort of, well, Jesus can move through them, but he can't move through me. So it's interesting. And as a healer, you really have to have that strong back and say, that's okay. If, again, if I'm in the energy of unconditional love and compassion, that means I'm not passing judgment on you. Yeah. So I honor the way that you work. I honor your institution, the way that your church operates and that, but you should also give that back to me. Right. And you should not pass judgment on me and what I do. And you should honor, and you should know that Jesus, the saints, the angels, all of it is available to all of us at every moment of the day and can move through each one of us. I'm not special to do this, and the signs and the synchronicities are everywhere. And therefore we should all work together in that and be in harmony. I don't know why we have such separation in it all. So
yeah, I totally agree. Yeah. The last few times that I have gone to church, it's felt more and more, and maybe it's just because like where I'm at energetically, but it's felt more and more like judgy. And I know people are a mirror of ourselves, so part of that is on me. Like I recognize I have an insecurity from church and I get that. But like I feel very strongly that the last time I went to a church like regularly, I was so turned off by certain judgments from people, by like the politics behind some of these churches. Like you mentioned, like male dominated and Catholic, like there is a non-denominational church. Yeah. To hire a female on staff a couple years ago, the elders, which are all men, had to all vote to agree on it. They had to vote, and it's 2024. Well, then it was probably 2022, but like it's 2022 and you have to vote to allow a woman to work for your church. Like, what is going on? This is ridiculous. Like, I just couldn't even believe my ears when I heard that. I was like, wow, this is actually way more backwards than it should be.
Yeah, it is. And I just always tell people too, even when we talk about meditation, I say to clients like, gosh, we have this idea that meditation is supposed to be like sitting cross-legged in a mudra for an hour and this big thing. It's like, no, it doesn't have to be. We make everything so much more complicated than it needs to be. And we can dial it down to just simple breath work every day as a meditation, just 2 minutes to breathe. Or we can say, you know what? I can find God in nature. I'm going to go walk. That's a meditation for me. You know, the animals speak to me, the trees speak to me, the elements speak to me. That is where I find source. That's where I find my connection to Holy Spirit. And so that can look differently for every single person. And that is okay. That's why there's Buddha and Jah and Allah and all that, you know?
Right. Yeah. It's similar to like prayer. Like you think of in your head, you know, if you were to like type in prayer and you wanted to like find a Google picture for it in your head, it's like you're bowed down and you're like this. But like to what you're saying, no, prayer can be out in nature when I'm hiking with my dog. Prayer can be, you know, when I go out into the timber. I mean, prayer does not need to be like, sitting head bowed. And then also like, and you can probably really relate to this. Like the last time I went to a Catholic church, I think it was like for a wedding, and that was after my spiritual awakening. And I get really turned off now going to Catholic services because all of these prayers, to me, it's just like chanting and there's no emotion to it. And I'm like, this sounds so cold. I actually remember like nudging my husband and being like, this feels so cold and unauthentic. Like it's just a chant. There's no emotion behind it, I feel like. And you're just repeating what the guy up on the altar said. Like, is that really what God intended prayer to be? I love spontaneous prayer.
Yes.
But I don't know. It's so weird to me.
So my son went to Catholic school for elementary, right? That was a big push for my husband because he went to Catholic school, you know, Catholic family, where I was like, it doesn't matter. Also, we live in rural Iowa. There is not really a difference between a public and private education like you get in inner cities with a lot more other factors that come into play, but it is a great school and, you know, lots of, you know, church moments with school masses and things like that. And, you know, I would go, but some of the stuff with church and especially in Catholic, it's like, I feel like people are just going through the motions. It's like stand up, sit down, fight. Like, I feel like it's just like, we're going to stand up, we're going to sit down. There is no maybe like we're just repeating. We know every part of Mass. We know it's just like that. It's like that studying for the test and knowing it, and I can say it, but am I embodying it, right? It comes down to like, am I living this word? Am I living in this? Am I embodying everything that's being move through me, or am I just going through the motions? But, you know, then there are other times I think where I'm really truly moved in the Mass. And sometimes it comes from, you know, maybe the homily, right? Because that is more of his authentic voice and words. And some of the songs maybe at the end that aren't like the traditional parts of Mass that are just these beautiful hymns where they move me to tears. And also just moments when I would be in Mass and I would be able to come into, I remember one of like the kind of the COVID, when I had gotten COVID and I was really, really sick and this and that. And I remember being able to finally feeling better to go to a school Mass. And I was just in tears because I had such gratitude to be able to be there, to be healthy enough to be there, to be able to see my kid read at Mass, you know. So it was just, that was a moment for me of prayer and gratitude and for being able to be there. But it's definitely the really larger question of, am I going to church? And it kind of comes back to our prior episode on the alcohol of the why. Do I go because I feel I have to? Do I go because I feel like if I don't go, then I'm a bad person? Like, what is my why and my relationship to why I'm doing X, Y, Z? And if it doesn't resonate with you, it is okay, because there are a million other ways to be connected to source and spirit.
Yeah, I agree. So I guess bottom line of this episode would be, I feel like there's a few themes that come out of it. Like, if your faith, whether it be religion or spirituality is important to you, ultimately at the end of the day, your goal should be embodying those characteristics, those qualities that God, source, universe expects of us. It's that God expects us to show unconditional love and compassion towards others. And
Right.
that's what we need to embody in our life. And then the other theme that I feel like comes out of it is pretty much what you just said. It's, working through the guilt, but knowing your why of whether you go or not, like knowing your why behind it, knowing your why behind your belief, I think is really important in general. Mm-hmm. And if you can relate to, if you're in that phase where like, maybe you're like us, where you grew up going to church and maybe you're not drawn to it anymore and you're feeling guilty about it, just know you're not alone. Like, this is a phase, you'll work through it. But I definitely think like exploring the guilt that you're feeling, exploring maybe the grief that you're going through is important. It's an important part of your healing journey. Mm-hmm. Any final notes that you want to add before you?
Yeah, no, I think that those are definitely the highlights. Just embodying it, coming in that energy of unconditional love and compassion, and really just sitting back with self and asking those deeper questions of, why do I go, or why do I feel guilty if I don't, or what, what is really resonating with me? What isn't resonating with me? Where can I maybe shift or not shift? And if you have questions on any of that, please reach out. Again, happy to help, to answer, to move through. And again, there's no judgment if you find your peace in church every Sunday, and there's no judgment if you find your peace every Sunday at the water.
Yeah, absolutely. That is perfectly said. I don't feel I can say it better. So perfect way of wrapping it up. All right, guys, if any of this resonates with you, feel free to DM Hilary or myself. I love hearing takeaways from people. I love hearing like what really hits home for people. And so don't be shy. Feel free to text or DM me or Hilary. And we'll probably do a shout out in a future episode if you do, because I always appreciate the feedback. All right, until next time, I'll talk to you later.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to us. It means so much to me. If there were any aha moments or anything that really resonated with you on today's episode, then please take a minute and share it on your social media and tag me so I can personally thank you. Also, if you could, please rate and review the podcast, as it is new and that really helps to get the word out there more and reach even more listeners. I'll catch you on the next episode.